Flea Market has been locked for almost 2.5 weeks now, but it's soon to unlock for every player. Now, we don't know the full scope. We don't know if it's going to be a found and raid flea or a non-found and raid flea, or something in between. We also don't know what restrictions, limits, or other parameters there are going to be, if any. So this video is just going to be a generic list for you on items that will be worth a ton of money regardless of all these rules, plus a few tips to find the other ones once the floodgates are open. Now, there is one simple rule that dictates all of these items and pretty much the entire Tarkov economy. That is supply and demand. But the degree of how much value you get is something that takes a little bit of game experience and knowledge to really figure out and be able to predict. That's where I come in. I'm going to show you guys what you can keep based on my experience over many years of playing Tarkov. Now, supply comes from one of two primary places. One, obviously finding stuff in raid and bringing it out to sell it, but also crafting. But that's with a found and raid flea. With a fully open flea, then traders act as a huge supply through both purchases and barters. So that factor can really change what items are worth money and which are not. The one thing that we do know, though, is that the found and raid requirement for the hideout upgrades is going to stay. Nikita has said as much. And while this makes some items worthless that we've all leaned on in the past, things like light bulbs or even bolts to a degree, this fact is also going to make other items worth much more than they ever have been in the past because you use them to craft items for building the hideout. Now, for those that don't know, crafting items gives that item, that product, a found and raid status. So if you craft motors, for example, or green batteries or car batteries, even though the components are non-found and raid, the product can actually be used to upgrade your hideout because it is found and raid. This factor is what we're going to focus on in listing items that are going to be worth a ton that people might not be paying attention to. And that's what this list is going to focus on. Not things that are really obvious, but stuff that people are going to overlook so that because you watch this video, you're going to be out that much better ahead than everybody else. An example of this is motors and electric drills, right? Everybody's keeping those because they need them for their hideout. They're going to see how much they're going to be worth, and so people are keeping those. I don't need to tell you to keep those. But this list of items will be on the flip side of that. So let's get into it and let you guys know what to do. Now, most people aren't going to be keeping things like yellow pliers, measuring tape, and get these positioned properly, red screwdrivers, wrenches, and ripstop. Oh, it'll only let me open 4. So we'll put that back up there, and it was yellow pliers. Don't forget about that. These items specifically are used to craft tool sets. Now, people do pick these up, but they don't pick them up a lot. Plus, they tend to be a little bit more rare than some of the other items in the game, so the supply just isn't there, but people are going to be burning through tons of these to craft their tool sets. 11 of these are needed found in raid just to upgrade the hideout. On top of that, players need an additional 5 to do some quests, though those don't have to be found in raid, but it still messes with the supply and demand of things. So yeah, these things are going to be worth a lot. On top of that, because the tool sets are spread out, you don't need them all right up front. You need bits and pieces of them as you upgrade your hideout. The value of these is going to last longer than a lot of these other things as people power through and don't need them so much. So if you're coming across these, especially things like measuring tape and wrenches, these are going to be worth the most, I think, because they tend to be the most rare and the least picked up. Now, I skipped over blue tape in the mention of the tool set craft. Yes, you do need tape in the tool set craft too, but it deserved its own slot because it is kind of special. Blue tape is really common. Lots of people are going to be keeping it, but I want to make sure people understand how valuable it's going to be simply because of how much demand there's going to be. Blue tape is used in 4 common crafts, as well as several hideout upgrades and 2 barters that get used a lot. This is one of those items that's plentiful, but has a ton of demand. So keep an eye on its price because it could make you a lot of money, especially if you're a filing cabinet looter. You know how many of these you can come across. Now, rounding out the crafting list specifically, we've got T-plugs, tube, and med tools. T-plugs specifically for the power cord craft, which I believe is going to be pretty popular for a while just because of how many of those you need. And these don't get picked up that much. Also, they're kind of rare. You don't see them all that often. So even if people do keep them, there's just not that many. On top of that, silicone tubes. These are kind of common, but a lot of people don't necessarily keep them to sell. They don't even realize that they're going to be worth a lot of money because you need them to craft hoses. So that alone, I think, is going to push the price of these up, at least for the first week or 2 of the flea market at opening, as people buy them up to craft all the hoses they need for their hideout, which I think it's the 36 hoses you need. I didn't go look, but you need a ton of hoses. So there's going to be a lot of demand for the silicone tubes. And then after that is med tools. They're pretty common, but again, people don't really pick them up unless they need them. But with CMS crafts, people aren't going to be able to craft or going to have a lot of CMS. So being able to craft CMSs and sell them is going to push this price up, I think, pretty high, especially because things like car med kits are fixed from the traders. So the medical tools will kind of follow the price of CMS kits as they go up. Now, the next little bit is kind of crafting, but I wanted to split food out into its own category because a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of money in food if you keep the right stuff. Now, if you're a veteran of Tarkov, you know exactly why these four are here, but not everybody is. So let's talk about that specifically, set the oat flakes aside. There is a barter on Jaeger that pretty much everybody needs eventually, and it is for the holodynamic, I can never say this right, the cooler, the food storage container. It takes hot rods, tarcolas, herrings, and squash. So all four of these are worth tons. Hot rods, supply and demand metrics a little weird, but even though it uses a lot, there's a higher supply, they still get to be worth quite a bit of money. And the same applies for herring and tarcola. These are all just good. Now, if you have to pick one amongst the four, squash is going to be the one that's going to be the most worthwhile. This is the one you want to keep whenever you find it. This is going to be worth a fortune, not just because of this barter, but because of other barters as well as crafts. Let me pull up my nutrition unit real quick and I'll show you guys specifically. First you have the can of beef stew small. Well, I don't know, that was hard to say. That one is, you need to craft, I believe, 15 of these for a therapist task. And a lot of people end up doing this, which also requires squash. And then you need the iskras. A lot of people are going to be crafting iskras for some of their tasks if they can't buy them or other stuff like that. Simply for the Jaeger task that needs to be found in raid or the ones you got to take into plant at the bunker. So it puts a lot of pressure on squash to be worth a lot of money. So squash is just a golden goose when it comes to food. Now, I had the oat flakes, but this is why the oat flakes are worth a lot. Slickers. Now, slickers, there's a long chain of stuff here that goes from crafting slickers to using slickers to barter for scav vests and some other stuff like that. That is why these are going to be worth a lot. Plus, people just don't keep them. That fact alone makes them pretty valuable. Even wipes where everything else is out there, you'll see oat flakes push 25, 30, 35K. So if that's what you want to sell them for the flea, I will. I think that's a great keep price for stuff that you want to make money off of. Now, back to the other items. Two other worth mentions. We kind of already talked about slickers. Again, worth keeping. Keep an eye on it because they can get cheap. They can get into that like 10, 11K, and then I usually don't keep them. But if you see them pushing 14, 15K because of scav vests, this is going to depend heavily on the found and raid side of things, but people use that quite a bit because of the tasks that require you to wear a scav vest. This is a barter. It's the quickest way to do it. Get you a scav vest on Jaeger, which pushes that price of slickers up. And then you have buckwheat. This is not for crafts, but for barters. Let me go to the required search and get my stuff shown right, and I'll show you specifically. Fuel is the big one. 4 buckwheats is going to equal a blue fuel. Now, well, basically what you're going to see is buckwheat around 20, 25K, unless you see blue fuels skyrocket to like that 120, 130K, which they have in the past. It just kind of depends on how people want to craft their mag boxes or not. So if you see blue fuels, you notice those being real expensive, keep in mind that buckwheat's going to chase that pretty closely and can be worth quite a bit of money if you find them in raid. Now, there are some other barters for them. I think there's a 133 barter and then a shrimp barter, and then there's a barter for the 220 key, which you need for a task. Not a lot of usage, so they don't burn a lot of buckwheat, but it's a little extra demand there. But buckwheat usually worth taking out of raid just to sell on the flea market. Now, the bottom of this, you've probably noticed, is a bunch of weapon parts. And the last of this list is centered around gunsmith. So it's not for everyone. If you don't like if you don't loot where weapon parts are, you don't like paying attention to them, this is probably not for you. But there is a ton of money in here. Some of these parts are some of the most valuable per slot items in the game you can loot in a raid. And that's because you can't just buy them. Some of them have barters, but a lot of people, when they're doing their gunsmith, they're just buying the first part they see. They don't care that it costs $150,000 to build the gun or $200,000 or $1 million. They buy the parts, they slap it on, they get their gunsmith done. So because of that, some of these parts can be worth quite a bit of money. So if you're in raid and you happen to notice these, keep them. Now, there is a caveat here. If we end up with an open flea where found in raid doesn't matter, it's going to change these prices quite a bit because people can just buy them off the traders, turn around and sell them on the flea market. So they will lose some value, but not as fast as other stuff, simply because not everybody's going to have level 4 traders or level 3 traders or have gunsmith done to buy these parts and sell them. But as the wipe progresses, they will get cheaper and cheaper. let's get into the list here so you guys know what to keep. Now, this is pretty much in the order of what you're going to see them on Gunsmith. But nonetheless, first one's gonna be Shift Grip. If you don't know about this, this one can be a pain in the ass to get. If you find it in a raid, it is worth a fortune. 150,000. I think I've seen it as much as 200,000 before, so just have to wait and see. The B30, this is an awesome thing to take out a raid. 75, 80, maybe even 100K most of the time. Just make sure you're not getting fooled by the Aspid. So there's two of them. They look damn near identical, right? You want to have the B30. That's the one you want to keep, not the Aspid. And here's what they look like. I'll put them up here. You can see how similar they look to each other, but you're looking for the B30. That's what you want to keep. Next up is the K21S. This is the IR illuminator, not the Klesh 2P. They look nearly identical to one another, but the K1S, the K21KS is going to be the one that's going to be worth the most, or is it KI2IKS, whatever. This is the one you want to keep. You can't buy it right away, and you need it for tasks. I think it's the same one here. It goes on there, and it's going to be very valuable for those trying to do their gunsmith. After this, we're getting to the Vector parts. That's what these three are here. So the Vector 6-inch barrel, Lockpine traders, can be worth a ton of money. They're pretty common. I've actually seen 4 or 5 of these just kind of lightly looting weapon attachments. Whether I keep them or not, I haven't, because I haven't really had the space. But as you get the Flea and we get more space, keep an eye out for these. Along with that is the MK5. This is easy to find or easy to notice. You just see this MK5. Keep that. This thing is going to be worth a ton too, because it's needed for that Vector, along with the tactical dynamic skeleton foregrip. And this is one of the more common grips you'll see. You kind of get it sometimes fooled. You see it, you might think it's a shift grip, but it's actually this. But it doesn't matter. Both of them are worth keeping for the gunsmith. Now, next up is the Annihilator. This one's actually going to be worth a ton no matter what, because you can't buy it. There is never a sale. There is a barter for it. If you're doing the task yourself, do the barter. It's not too bad. It's a TP 200. But if you find one of these in raid and you can get it out, you either use it yourself or be able to sell it for a ton as people go through that MPX barter. With this is the OFG OD Olive Drab. There is 2 of these grips. You have the AFG OD and the FG. The Forest Green, worthless. It's not worth anything. But whoopsies. The OD is worth a ton. It's locked behind higher traders, and I think it's even locked behind the task. But nonetheless, you can't just buy it to do the task. So people will be looking to buy that, especially as they get into their gunsmith and they're trying to get it done. Now, for the GL Shock, keep an eye out on this because it shows up on like Rashala guards and some other guns like that, or you just see it floating around. Its price tends to fall off a little faster than others, but it is still great. I love seeing it because I insurance fraud. I'll just take my stock off and I'll put this one on there and get out of raid with it, and hopefully remember to take it off, but sell it for quite a bit of money. Early wipe for those gunsmith. The Laze Tac 2 used to be a lot more common. This is a great flashlight to keep. It used to be on scav guns, shotguns a lot. I haven't seen it as frequently now. I am seeing it on Raider and Rogue guns though, so when you're looting those, look for this specific flashlight. Because again, you can't just buy it. It's going to be worth a lot of money. I think it's even kind of expensive on the trader. It's even worth 20,000. So even without needing for gunsmith, it's kind of got that pressure from the trader to be worth some extra money. So there you go. The CNC, I only bring this one up out of personal kind of angst. You get a couple of these. I think you get 4 of them from a task, and they're pretty common. I think my ones from the task timed out. I got stuck. Ended up having to wait for a friend to get his task done where he got the 4 of them. It's the one where you got to plant the cameras for skier. I think informed means armed. Informed means armed, or whatever it is. Gives you 4 of these. Make sure you keep one of them. They are going to be worth decent money depending on if people remember to keep them or not, or if they sell them when they get them from their task. So just a sore subject for me. That's why I put it in there. Make sure you don't make the same mistake I did. The LA5B PQ. Now, this one I think is still going to be worth a lot of money because we've seen it in the past. However, it can be pretty easy to get. Lots of rogue weapons have this on there. So it's just a matter of people are parting their rogue weapons out and selling them or not. It depends on how aware players are, if these are going to be worth a bunch or not. They should still be pretty valuable. If you go to sell 1 or 2 of them and you notice they're not, obviously pass up on it. They're not bad loot because I think even vendoring them, they're worth 9,000. So if you slap one on your gun or whatever, it's kind of just free 9,000 rubles even if you vendor it, but potentially worth a lot more because of the gunsmith. The Clash 2U, big old flashlight. You'll see these on all sorts of guns, scav guns sometimes, things like that. A lot of boss guns and guards have them. Worth a bunch of money. Keep it. It's a higher end gunsmith. I say higher end, but not like your ones you're going to do in your first 10 or 15 levels. But it's a harder one to get. So it's like the other flashlights we have in here. People just don't realize they need it. They don't keep it. They go to do their gunsmith and there's one item. So they'll pay 40 or 50,000 for it just to get the gunsmith done. The next one is the EOTech HHS1 hybrid sight. You see these quite a bit. You'll see them on players' guns. If you do snatch it because you need it for your own gunsmith, you can't buy it prior to it or with hired traders. So if you see this on rogue guns or wherever you see it, you find it in raid, get it out because these will be worth, 70, 80, maybe even 100,000 rubles, which to me is great money to keep. And then the last one is a Zukov, and it kind of seems silly to say this, but I wanted to put it in here because if you find one found in raid, try to keep it found in raid. If that's the way the flea market goes, it's going to be where you can get close to it with stats with other builds. So if you're trying to build an AK and you have one of these, save it because it's required for gunsmith. You have to have this specific stock. It's really high level to be able to buy it, so most people don't get it. They have to buy it off the flea market. And it just adds a ton of value to how much it costs, especially early wipe. So that's it. That is the list. That is the 15 items. I'll put them back in here. So if you want to take like a screenshot or something, these are the ones you want to keep an eye out for and have a memory for because they are just worth a ton of money. It's not all of them. There's more, but I could have had a list of like 50 items if we wanted to go all the way into it. Now, like I said, this whole list, all of these items is just to get you started through the beginning of this flea market madness that's coming our way. Never had a wipe like this where people have had time to level up, stock up, as well as have a found and raid requirement on the hideout. So we're really headed in unknown territory here. Once the flea opens up and I get a better idea what's going on in the economy, just seeing what players are doing, we'll get more videos out for you guys to update you and keep you up to speed. But with that, we'll wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching as always. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps me out a ton. I wish you the best of luck in your raids, and we'll see you in Tarkov.